All right. Let's see if I remember to put the audio on this time. Let's see, testing. All right. All right, so that's good. Okay. So if you're watching this, no one's watching it right now, but this is an impromptu stream. I just do this sometimes to do some work without being easily distracted by like reading Reddit threads and watching cat videos and listening to music and so. Well, music's not really a distraction, but a little bit more concentrated time. And I just want to play with some stuff. Some stuff I haven't played with before, or playing with stuff I have, but in a different way, or whatever it is. And today is going to be Ansible and Cisco ACI. So the goal today is to work with, put in today's goals, is get some stick time, as they say, on Ansible and ACI. And all of my ACI work for the past couple of years has been done primarily on devices that have a single configuration file. So those are things like routers and switches from Arista, Juniper, Cisco, and they work controller based. So I haven't worked with controllers in a while. Now, I used to teach Cisco ACI. I used to be a Cisco certified systems instructor. It was a special certification you could get to teach Cisco courses. I'm no longer certified in that. I let it lapse because I wasn't teaching any Cisco courses. But I was very familiar with Cisco ACI. Now some of that skill has definitely gone by the way. Some of that skill has definitely perished. Like anything else, it's a perishable skill. So there's a lot I do retain, and there's some stuff I don't remember, and then sometimes I'm not sure what I remember and what I don't. But I remember the basic operations and the basic concepts of ACI. And so I haven't done a whole lot of work with Ansible and ACI. I did a little bit in like 2018, 2019 when I was working for a different learning partner, and we did a lot of Cisco stuff. And we would just use it on the back end to automate our labs, but we never taught students how to use it. So this is going to be me getting some more stick time. So what I've done is I set up an account. Well, I already have a Cisco account, and I used their DevNet environment. I haven't played with DevNet in a long time, and I was like, oh, I have a Cisco ACI simulator, but it's an older version. It's like 5.2. And I couldn't get it to work. It just wouldn't work in my environment. And I got sick of playing around with it, so I thought maybe DevNet's got it. And they do. And the environment's a lot different than I remember. So here's my environment. I'm running on Cisco DevNet. And there's a Linux box that's acting as my Ansible control node. And there's a ACI, Cisco ACI. It's simulated, so there's no real physical equipment. And here it is right here. So I got some tenants and a fabric and a bunch of other stuff. And I think right now it's just simulating that I've got. It's a little bit slow. There we go. Yeah, 1 spine and 2 leaves. So that's fine. I don't really care. So Cisco ACI simulated, and I've got this desktop that you're seeing me stream from that I'm sharing, and one of the kind of annoying things about DevNet that I forgot about, I don't remember if this was the case when I was using it, or even if I was using something called DevNet, I don't remember. But there used to be some labs I could work with. Yeah, but again, it's been a number of years. I have to VPN. I don't know why I'm using this for my VPN. I had to dig up an old copy of AnyConnect. Like, really, you can't think of a better way to do this. You can't download it unless you have an existing support contract. And I've always had trouble with the various, because I've worked with a bunch of different partners, And I've always had trouble getting access to those things. It's such a pain. And but I found an old copy that I had, and I was able to start it up. So I'm VPN'd in to the DevNet environment. So let's make a little thing here, and I'll put this into the back. Give it a different color. Let's do gradient. It's too complicated. So this is Cisco's DevNet. And so it's very simple. The whole environment is very simple. So I'm just going to be making some API calls. So ACI has 3 different interfaces that you can interact with, and one of them is the REST API. Make that smaller. REST API. Well, so one of them is the REST API, and there's also kind of this faux CLI adjacent, which is there's also the GUI, which I'll also be using. I'm using the GUI to verify what Ansible is doing. They're both just front ends for the REST API. So when you're interoperating with the GUI, you're actually just interacting with the REST API. When you're operating with the faux CLI, you're just operating with the REST API. Anyway, so the Linux control node. It's not my normal tool, so I don't have VS Code. I'm kicking it old school with Vim, VI. And luckily, I used to be a Unix administrator back in like the 90s and early 2000s, so I know Vim pretty well. I think you could probably use Nano. Yeah, you could use Nano. That's another text editor. So I don't have my normal IDE tools, which is kind of annoying. And I cloned some labs that were public on one of the. I found they weren't for this lab, they were for another lab I found. So I cloned some. This is a good starting point because I forgot what all this does, and I made some changes. For example, it surprised me that in the inventory, the inventory file that they use is an INI file, which is weird because that's the older style of doing these inventory files. I much prefer YAML just because of the control, and you can see the hierarchy embedded in the indentations, and you don't really get that with the INI stuff. So it's interesting because it reminded me of how I used to do Ansible. So like 5 years ago when I was first learning Ansible and first setting up a lot of stuff for networking, a lot of the conventions here are what I used back then, and then I've adjusted them. So this reminds me of where I was like 5 years ago. For example, there's no Ansible config file. They use INI files. They load variables instead of using group vars and stuff, and that's all mistakes. Well, not maybe mistakes. There's a certain way to doing things. I think that there's a better way to do it, just naturally. It's just not my opinion, but I think anyway. So that's my environment. So what are goals? So one is to get some stick time on Ansible and ACI, and 2, to see if I can come up with a data model that enables a single YAML file for logical policies, another for the access policies, and another for the fabric policies. And I'll show you what I mean by that. They didn't do any of that in the labs, at least the lab guides that I looked at. So I'm wondering if I could do a better job. And it just comes from the experience that I've had from working with these centralized data models, single sources of truth, that kind of thing. So before we dive into that, let me tell you a little bit about ACI config. So like I said, ACI is not a single configuration file device. So over here we'll have a spine. In our environment, we have a spine and 2 leaves. They're not real, they're simulated. They can't even do data planes, so you can't ping them or anything like that. So just pretend. But for these purposes, it doesn't really matter. And what we're talking to is we're not talking to the spines and we're not talking to the leaves. We're talking to the APIC controller. So this is the APIC controller, and the APIC controller is what actually does the configuration of the spines and leaves. You have no direct access to the spines and leaves for configuration. You can log into them and run show commands. In fact, most of the NXOS show commands you run on a standalone NXOS system work on these devices, plus a couple others that are more ACI related. But you cannot go into config mode. There is no config mode on those devices. All of the configuration state is stored in the APIC for all of the leaves and spines in your ACI fabric. The other thing is that it's not stored in a single file. There is a CLI-esque running config, but it's not real. It's more of a representation of what actually exists inside of the APIC. They use what's called a managed object model. So there's I don't want to call it a database, but there's hundreds, maybe thousands of these XML files that are just kind of bouncing around in here. And then like one XML file will represent a tenant. Another XML file will represent a bridge domain. Another XML file will represent an EPG. Everything is an object. And they all have references to each other. So, for example, when I create a VRF, I have to select a tenant. So they're referencing each other. They're cross-referencing each other. It's kind of like a database, but it's not stored in a relational database. So you don't have direct access to that. And thank goodness, because it's pretty complicated. What you do have access is to the REST API, which can do the create, read, update, delete, CRUD, C-R-U-D. So I can create an object, I can modify an object, I can read an object, and I can delete an object. And so that's what we're doing with the REST API. In the Cisco, an ACI configuration state is divided into three separate areas, and we're only going to concentrate on one today. There's the logical model. There are access policies. We call them logical policies too. And then there are fabric policies. So the logical model is things, and I actually really like the way that ACI does it. We have things like tenants, VRFs. We have these things called bridge domains and gateways. We have EPGs. And then we have contracts and a couple other things. But those are the ones we're really going to concentrate on. We probably won't even do contracts. The access policies are where the insanity of ACI comes into play. It is just absolutely bonkers. Let me see if I'm going to look at my Dropbox in another window here. I'm going to see if I can find yeah, there it is. Access policies. Download this. There we go. All right. So this is what I used to use to teach ACI, because you've got this tenant, and that stuff's pretty okay. And then you have to create a physical or VMM domain, attach a VLAN pool to it, attach it to an AEP. You've got an interface policy group, and that's got some interface policies, and then you have to create an interface profile plus an interface selector, which is attached to a switch profile, which has a switch selector. And that's just to light up like VLAN 10 on a port. So I'm going to use a graphic here. Let's see if I can find one. Just grab something. Yeah, there be monsters. That's what's going on. There's monsters here. So we're not going to do that. And then the fabric policies is stuff like leafs, spines, TEP addresses, switch settings, that kind of stuff. So we're not going to deal with any of those. We're just going to work with a logical model. So highlight that. Shape fill, no fill, outline, green. Make that weighted. So that's what we're going to do. All right. So this is the environment. We've got a single Linux control node. I've SSH'd into it, and I'm using Vim, kicking it old school. And we've got a virtual ACI APIC that have some simulated spines and leaves. And we're going to connect through Ansible into the REST API. So here is ACI here. Now I could go in and I could do all this stuff by hand, but it's kind of tedious to click, 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 click. So here I've got a tenant. I'm just going to go ahead and delete this tenant, if I can remember how to do that. Delete tenant. It might not let me do it because it, oh, it did. Okay, cool. So I'll start over. So I want to create I just want to create a tenant. And let me model this out for you. So how ACI does it. So ACI logical model hierarchy is at the top we have the tenant, and then we have a VRF. We can have multiple VRFs, and then we have bridge domains, and then we have EPGs. Now, the relationship between a bridge domain and an EPG is an interesting one. You can think of a bridge domain as like a primary private VLAN and an EPG as a secondary private VLAN, because even though they share the same subnet, only things inside of an EPG can communicate without a restriction. And to communicate to other EPGs or to the outside world, usually you have to have a contract. But most people run their VRFs in unenforced mode, which means there's no any. ACI, the tragedy of ACI, other than it being incredibly complicated in some parts, this part wasn't actually all that complicated, but the tragedy is that it was denial by default, but we just never had the tools to figure out how to have these things talk. And that's not an ACI problem, that's an industry-wide problem. So doing smaller segmentation has been a very tough nut to crack. So you can think of an EPG typically as just one EPG per VLAN. And a bridge domain just has, think of that as the, it's like having one primary private VLAN and one secondary VLAN. Anyway, that's all we need to know about that for now. We're going to create a tenant, VRF, bridge domain, EPG, and then we'll do the. I don't think we'll have time to do the other part, the access policies, because they get ridiculously complicated. I mean, it was bonkers. I think there actually was ACI 6.0. There might be a different way to do it. That'd be nice, but I have not worked with Cisco ACI 6.0. I've worked with almost all the others, major tracks. Okay. So here's our environment. Let's take a look at inventory. It was an INI and I just rewrote it in YAML because my brain can't do that anymore. And so we just have the simple credentials. I've got an all group, and under hosts, I've got APIC. That's the controller. We're logging in with the credentials of admin and Cisco 12345. There's a Python interpreter thing in here. I think it's part of this environment. And then we've got the Ansible host because APIC is not in DNS. So it's just an IP address. So when we do Ansible, it either has to be in DNS, in itsy hosts, or Ansible host in the inventory file. So we're just going to do Ansible host in the inventory file. You might be able to put it somewhere else, but we'll keep it there. So for variables, I generally will only put credentials as variables in an inventory file, and then everything else goes somewhere else. Credentials and connection parameters, that kind of thing. So let's take a look at the first of their playbooks, and then maybe we'll modify it. Let's just modify this. I'll copy it. I'll put these into a GitHub repo. Maybe at the end of the class. Pickle Spread says we'll have to watch this later. Great channel. Oh, thank you. And if you have any questions, just pop up. This is impromptu. I didn't plan this or I didn't advertise this. This is just me doing some work and explaining to myself mostly, and then creating some content that people might find useful. So I'm gonna create a copy of this. I'm gonna call this make or create tenant. Sometimes it's just easier to start with something. Okay, so ensure application. Wow, why are you shouting? Let's call it make a tenant. Host is the APIC, connection is local. This is interesting. On the other modules that I've used to connect to other devices, the connection is usually you set like HTTP API or something like that. Here we're setting it to local. I wonder, does the API... So connection local, when you see it in Ansible, means execute the Python code on the local system. Normally, when you're running an Ansible module, then what happens is it's expecting the other side to be a server. So we're sending the actual Python code over to the server and executing it locally on the server. And here we're saying don't do that. The module that we're using, the ACI module, in this case it's ACI tenant, run that locally and execute that code locally, and it's going to SSH, or it's going to make HTTP calls out to the controller. So I wonder if there's a different place we could put this, because I don't like having it there. And the other one is gather facts equals false. You know what? I'm going to see if I can just copy my standard Ansible config file. They don't have any Ansible config files at all in this environment, and so again, it kind of reminds me of where I was about 5 years ago. So I'm going to exit out of here, and yeah, I'll do vim ansible.cfg, and I'll just paste it. Host key checking false. I don't need that because we're not SSHing it in anything. Because the APIC controller, you only go in through the REST API, which is through HTTPS. Inventory is inventory.yaml. Gathering equals explicit. So go back to create tenant. So gathering facts, I can get rid of that because we're not going to gather any useful information from ACI based on the default. There is a gather ACI, so I can actually gather useful things about ACI and put them into variables, but I'm not going to do that. So connection local, I think I still do need that. And then this actually prompts you. I've never done this before. I didn't even realize you could do this. It actually prompts you what do you want your tenant name to be. And yeah, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to create just a simple tenant. Host is Ansible host, which hopefully is this. Username. Thought we had the credentials set. This is interesting that it's putting the credentials in here instead of pulling them from the inventory file. Username and password. Maybe we can just pull those. Yeah, I should be able to pull those variables. State present, validate certs false. It's a self-signed certificate, so we don't care about that. Tenant. And then we'll just specify the tenant. Called tenant 1. Then we'll put a description in there. So this should be able to create a tenant. So just something simple. So we'll do Ansible playbook. And then create tenant. So no inventory. So no inventory. I have, I misspelled Ansible config. So when you run the Ansible playbook command, it looks in the local directory. It looks into several places for an Ansible config file, and then it looks in the local directory. So this should be able to parse it now. Okay, so I'm if I go here, there is tenant 1, and then if I do create tenant, I'm just going to, I got to change this language. Then Ansible is something called idempotent, which means if I run the same playbook again, and I'm modifying the state on the system, if the system's already modified its state, it's not going to change anything. So I can run this 100 more times and it won't change anything because all I did was add tenant 1 and it's there. And then if I wanted to create, let's see if I do tenant 1, and I wanted to create a bridge domain under the tenant. So that would be under networking. Or I need to create a VRF rather. So there's something else I want to do. Ansible starts complaining about this. You want to use the fully qualified module namespace name. So this would be Cisco ACI.ACI tenant. Now it'll work if you just specify the module name, but it wants the whole fully qualified domain name. And I think when they first started with these extra modules, I don't think it really mattered because there was a very low chance of colliding the module names. But I think that's probably more of a chance now because so many different vendors and so many different developers are making modules for Ansible because it's so popular. So I think that's probably why it's doing it that way. I also have a time limit. The environment's going to last for another hour and 17 minutes. I don't think I'm going to try to do this more than an hour. So yeah, we create a tenant, and I also had to change Vim's tabbing. So it was tabbing like 6 spaces by default, and YAML is a 2 space. So when I hit tab, it will add 2 spaces. Instead of adding 6 spaces. That doesn't actually put in an ASCII tab. And then we'll add VRF, and I'm assuming this will be Cisco ACI VRF. Probably this all stuff is the same. Oh yeah, I'm in Vim. So what I can do is 2, 3, 4, 5, yank, 5, yank. So I'm using Vim. Vim is a pretty interesting editor. It has a high learning curve. Not as much as Emacs. I tried Emacs back in the 90s and never going to do that again. It was really useful before we had better editors or before we had desktop editors that were good enough to do this kind of stuff. And I still remember most of the I can't remember, it was the Vim commands or Vim movement. I think that's what they call it. Anyway. So we're looking at the documentation. So all these different modules, like over 100. So there's a VRF module. Let's see what it needs. What parameters? It probably needs a parent. So we'll use that as the basis. So we'll give it a, it's weird that they don't put the credentials somewhere else. I don't know why they clutter it that way, because we don't do that with the other modules. Anyway. Validate certs, and then we need a tenant. So when we need a VRF, we'll call it VRF tenant 1. Oh, another thing about ACI was it was hard to come up with a consistent naming convention because you wanted to be consistent how you name things. but you had to create so many objects. You had to create like hundreds of objects, even for a simple deployment. So the names got kind of long. You're going to see that here in a second here. So you usually want to put the name, the type of the object in the name, or at least I did. Tenant1 VRF1. So it's a VRF for tenant1 for VRF1. You can see that these names are going to get kind of long here. And then we need a tenant, a parent tenant, so that'll be tenant1. To put these in quotes. Yeah, I guess it's create tenant still. It's just creating all the stuff inside the tenant too. So we are adding a tenant1 and we're adding a VRF. Let's see if this will work. Ansible playbook, create tenant. So I didn't like something. Oh yeah, I think that was it ACI VRF? Couldn't resolve the module ACI tenant. Did I misspell it? Oh, no, it's tenant. VRF module, ACI VRF. Cisco ACI VRF. How could you not? I didn't misspell it. Oh, ACI tenant. Yeah, it couldn't find that one. So, so ACI, where's tenant? Tenant. ACI tenant. Spelled it right. Maybe this. So we'll do Ansible Galaxy collection list. Oh, this is an older version of Ansible. See what happens here. Well, let's fix that problem. It had just an really old version of ACI on there. I don't know why it did. Okay, so let's see if it created the bridge domain. Or VRF rather. We're adding VRFs. Okay, yeah, there it is. VRF tenant A. All right, cool. Couple of things about a VRF. One of the things in the policy that we often will set is if it's enforced or unenforced. And there's a segment ID right there. But that's, by the way, that's an L3 VNI in the EVPN world. It's almost identical to it in purpose. But enforced and unenforced, most of the time we do unenforced or something similar to that. And that just means that it's any because it used to, the idea was that between your subnets, between your EPGs, which are subsets of subnets, were like little layer 2 boundaries that are smaller than VLANs. So that's what an EPG is. It's a layer 2 boundary that can be smaller than a VLAN. So I can have multiple EPGs on the same subnet. And you would need contracts, which were filters, stateless filters between them. But two problems with that. One, every time you did a contract, it would eat up TCAM space, policy forwarding cam space, basically ACL space. And you'd have to know how they talked. And most of the time, we didn't know how they talked. And when we put in all the rules that we thought we might need, it started to eat up too much of the TCAM, and we would run out of TCAM space and would cause an issue. So we just click on Unforce and just do it like everyone else does. So intra-VRF traffic would often get inspected, or inside of a VRF, it was usually just any between the subnets. I mean, not always, but it's pretty common. So we do unenforced. So let's see if I can find that in the, so this is the tenant module. It's not a tenant parameter, it's a VRF parameter. So I want to, because it's such a common option to select, I just want to put it in the playbook, even if we just say keep it enforced. Let's look up enforce. Policy control preference. Enforced and unenforced. So let's go ahead and edit that. We'll do unenforced. There's no data traffic going through this anyway. And let's see if there's any other settings that I normally would change. I mean, that's another thing about ACI. The logical model is not too bad, but there's so many knobs, and I don't even remember. I've never known what they all do. You could do preferred groups. You could do route target. There's a bunch of BGP stuff. EIGRP. I don't know why you would ever want to do EIGRP in ACI or anywhere else for that matter. I'd rather do ISIS, but that isn't supported here. Interesting. IP data plane learning. Yeah, there's a whole bunch. Oh, there's still Gulf and Opflex. Stuff's coming back to me. We've got route controls. There's all sorts of fancy stuff you can do on here. All right, so we created a VRF. The next thing we need to do is create a bridge domain. So that is bridge domain. So we'll just find that. Bridge domain. Yeah, bridge domain module. Look at the examples. I'm going to create 2 bridge domains. Let's yeah, we'll do a little diagram here. So this will be tenant 1. It's pretty common that every tenant would only have one VRF. There's one really nice thing about I guess you can say I have a love-hate relationship with ACI. There's one really nice thing about ACI. There's no other platform that I know of that is multi-tenant like ACI, where I could give control of various ports, and I could create a tenant, assign the ports to that tenant, and that tenant could only modify their individual ports on the leafs and their domain. So they can mess up however they want. And if you had an automation script that went in, even if you don't give users control, because you're not going to give users control of the network, but I could create business units or prod and dev or whatever, and I could separate them out, and I could control the blast radius because the prod ports would be assigned to the prod tenant, and they would be given the resources they need. And if something happened in the automation and it blew it up, it won't affect the other tenants. Same thing, like for a dev tenant, I can create a sandbox that I can do all sorts of really cool stuff with. And then if I just make a terrible mistake, as long as my automation only has the credentials for that tenant, it won't go beyond the tenant. So ACI is the only network platform that I know of that does that. EVP and VXLAN doesn't have that built in. It can do it. It just doesn't have the management plane above it to do it. And I don't know of any management planes above it that do that. Okay. So, people rag on ACI a lot, and I do my own fair share of it, but that's the case. What do we call that? I already forgot the naming convention. It was VRF tenant 1, VRF 1. So I'll make this a slightly different color. And then I want to create 2 bridge domains and then 2 EPGs under each. And we would call this network centric, because basically we're just mimicking SVIs and VLANs. So we would have 2 bridge domains. I'm gonna make this VRF a different color. Make that purple. Make these blue, and then make the EPG red. Because for whatever reason in my head, for whatever reason in my head, blue is L3 and L2 is red. I don't know why. Okay, so we've got a bridge domain. If I did like VRF1 to just let it know it was in VRF1, which I might do if I had multiple VRFs, that would get, the object names get kind of long. But I will I'll go ahead and truncate it. I don't know if that's a good idea or not, but that's what I'll do. And then they also will have a subnet. So put that in there. And this is what we're going to create. And this will be an EPG. The EPG is what goes to the ports. It's basically a VLAN. Might have to create an application. I forgot about that. Tenement 1, EPG2. You can come up with more creative names, but they should make sense. All right, so that's what we're going to do. All right, so the next one is we're going to create a bridge domain. So bridge domain. We'll copy the boilerplate. So this is why I'm surprised they don't. Oh yeah, I can yank 5 yank. Why they don't put this stuff in a different place. VRF. We do have to select these two things because they go. Because they go with these two. Because they're all related. I think I have to. I don't know if I have to have the whole name. Like if I say bridge domain, do I have to just say the tenant that it's in, or do I have to say the tenant or say the VRF that it's in, or do I have to say the tenant VRF? Well, let's find out. And then I want to know the bridge domain. Wow, that's a lot of stuff. Really don't care. Modifier bridge domain. I think I just need to create MAC address would be the virtual MAC address. VRF. Looks like we do need to say the VRF. A lot of these are options I really don't care about. Link local addresses I don't care about. VMAC. Don't care about. I wonder what the difference between those two VMACs are. Optimize WAN bandwidth. No. VLAN. Oh, we can specify a VLAN. Yes, I think just give it a name. All right, so that's easy enough. What are we calling it? BD tenant 1 BD. Okay, I think that's enough. Let's give it a try. Yep, there's a bridge domain. Looks like a subnet's going to be a separate thing, so I'll have to create a subnet. I'll do another module here. Subnet. Someone might have come up with a better way to do all this. Where's the subnets? BD subnet. Someone might have come up with a role or something that does all this, but I'm just goofing around here. Delegate to localhost, yeah. And this documentation is kind of inconsistent here. All right, create a subnet. I'll just copy that. That auto tab. Does it work? Let me try. Control right bracket. Nope. Darn it. You can program it. You can change the settings so that if you do control right bracket, it'll automatically indent or control right bracket will indent and dedent and all that. Okay, I don't think we need delegate to localhost because that is done up here, connection local. I think that's what that does. Again, this is kind of a weird way of doing all this. At least, I mean, it's weird in that I've not done it before. So, all right. So APIC, delete, yank 3 yank, y3y. So that, oh, darn it. It was actually, yeah, there we go. State is present. Put it here to keep it consistent. Then I'll steal these, yank 2 yank, or yank 3 yank, 3 yank. Already did VRF. Yank 2 yank. And gateway is 10.1, 10.1. All right, try that. Unsupported parameters. Didn't like something. Unsupported parameters for BDI or for BD subnet module VRF. Supported parameters include create subnet for BD or for bridge domain. Maybe it doesn't want a VRF. No, yeah, it didn't want a VRF. Interesting. Yeah, it just derived the VRF from the bridge domain. Does it even need a tenant? Can I just derive it from the bridge domain? Nope, it wants a tenant. All right. Now, so I've created these objects, and you can see this is going to get really tedious, and it's going to get really obnoxious. So, like, I feel I've got the feel for these modules, and maybe there's a better way to do this, but maybe someone else has come up with a better way to do this. But I'm going to go ahead and try my hand at a trick that I've done in other environments. And I'm going to put stuff in group vars. I'm going to try to create a simple data model that I can pull, that I can put into variables that will get put into these modules, and they'll just loop through the what's going on in those. Because I think that might be easier. So let's try that. So I've already created a group vars directory. I'm going to create a... Do I want to do this? Because you're usually going to have at least 3 apics. Let's do let's just make this a little bit more realistic. So we'll have a group, or we're going to have another group called apic cluster. And whenever we have a cluster, I generally will put the credentials and other parameters in the vars for the group, and then the host just has its own IP address. So this is how we would do it, because this is probably going to be apic 1. So let's go ahead and change that to create tenant, just to keep things consistent here. Because it's an all-active cluster, you only have to hit one of the apics. You don't have to hit all of them. But they do share these parameters, so... like apic 2 might be .15 and so forth. So I'm putting I do this when I do Cloud Vision as well, or if I do something where I'm pushing configs to a lot of different devices, I'll create a group for those devices and then maybe some subgroups, but that group that includes all those devices will have all the credentials in one place. And then yesterday's episode of Automating Network Configurations with Ansible, episode 5 had how to use Ansible Vault to hide that password, because we generally do not want to put passwords in plain text. Okay, so I'm going to try to create a data model, and I'm going to go into group vars here, and I'm going to create a new file called, it's got a match, so it's apic cluster.yaml, 3 dashes, and then I'm going to have a section for tenants, and then I'm going to list the tenants. Let's go ahead and list them out here. Let's see if I can loop and make these. Now here's a question. Like, let's say I have tenant 1, tenant 2, tenant 3. So do I do tenant 1 as a key, tenant 2 as a key? Fix that. Tenant 2, tenant 3. Do I do that? Or do I do this? Do I do dictionaries upon dictionaries, or do I do a list of dictionaries? I kind of prefer this way, but it might require me to do some weird stuff, and we'll find out. So I'm going to create I'm just going to create the tenants, and we're going to create a playbook that's going to loop through those variables. So this is just going to make us a very nice, simple YAML-based data model that I can use for all of my logical policies. So logical policies are: what are my tenants, what are my VRFs, what are my bridge domains, what are my subnets, what are my EPGs. I haven't even got to EPG, but I feel I've got a handle on that. So we're going to do some looping, and then it's going to be lots of looping within looping within looping. So that's going to be interesting. Can we do that nested looping? I've never tried. So this may not be successful. So that's why I didn't announce this. Okay. Let's just see if we can loop through. We'll do one thing at a time. When you're working on these projects, you solve one problem at a time. It might help to think about some additional problems ahead of time. And then maybe you might realize, oh, this is not going to work. But sometimes it's just, you know what, YOLO. Let's go for it. I'm going to yeet a solution here, as you kids say. All right, so APIC cluster. I was playing around with the other stuff for the intranet vars full config. I don't care about that. So APIC cluster YAML. So I'm going to create a playbook. Do I put, yeah, go ahead and make a playbook directory. So playbooks, loop, ACI config .yaml. First, copy some of this stuff. All right, so here's a playbook. We're going to run it against APIC 1, connection local, and we are going to loop through tenants. Yeah, so that's the key. Just all lowercase tenants. Loop through tenants. And the tenant will be item.name, I think, perhaps. Let's give this a go. Oh, yeah, I need to be in the parent directory where the Ansible config file is. Tenants is undefined. APIC 1 is part of the group. So this should be tenants group vars. So there's a group called APIC cluster. There's a group vars directory, and there's a file called APIC cluster. Oh, it's case sensitive, so I need to just rename it with a capital C. All right, that worked. So let's see if it created them. All tenants. Yep, tenant 1, tenant 2, tenant 3. Sweet. And it even says with a sick loop, man. All right, so that's cool. Let us... All right, now here's where where it's going to get weird. And again, I don't know if I can even do this. So you are on a journey with me. I'm looking at APIC cluster. How much time do I have left in the lab environment? 45 minutes. So let me just extend it by an hour. Yep, they let me extend it. Cool. All right, so tenant 1. VRFs. And the name, do I do VRF1? I'm just going to keep the naming very simple. And I'm going to have it create 2 VRFs. VRF2. Yeah, let's do T1 just to All right. Here's where I don't know if this is going to work. So add tenants and such. And then add tenants, because we're not just adding tenant 1. Then the next task will be because I can't loop through that. How do I do a loop within a loop in ACI or in Ansible? Can you? I could try to register. Because I can loop and create the... let's try to create a loop. Add BDs. Or VRF. We're doing VRFs. So I can specify a loop of tenants, and I could say tenant 1. Let's see if that works. And then figure out how to get the other ones in there. List attribute has no object tenant 1. Is it tenant 1? List object has no name, so yeah, I might have to. So there's a couple ways we could handle this particular problem. Again, one problem at a time. Is I could just do this. Oh, it's VRFs. I didn't forget to put that. So tenants. Name equals item. VRFs. Almost certain that's not going to work. List object has no attribute name. Yeah, so this might be group vars. Might be something where I have to do this. This is a lot easier to loop through. There might be a better way to do it, and I just don't know what it is. There's a market for watching people get stuck with a problem on YouTube. I might be able to corner it. So not doing dict of lists of dictionaries, but just doing dictionaries, key value pairs. I don't really like doing it this way though. So we'll just do it for that one. So this might actually be easier to do. Because we're going through the for tenants, tenant 1, VRFs. Requires a list. If you passed a list dict of just one element, try adding want list true. Because here we're looping through the tenants' names. Oh, it didn't even like that. Oh. There might be a way to do this. Okay. Get relaxed here. All right, I'm going to take a quick, I'm going to grab some coffee. Stuff's getting serious now. Okay. So working the problem I'm facing here is ideally I'd love to create just a single YAML file. So let's take a step back and work the problem statement here. Ideally, I'd like to create a single YAML file that represents the entire configuration state of the logical model. So all the tenants, all the bridge domains, all the VRFs, just one place. So it'd be a very simple file. And I could just continually run this. So if I wanted to add a tenant, I would just run it and would add a tenant. There's also another problem with this though. It doesn't delete anything. So if I ever wanted to delete a tenant or delete a network, I would actually have to delete it in the YAML file and delete it here. because all this thing can do is add. I could create a playbook that could compare what is on the system with what is in the YAML file and then do deletions. But actually, I wouldn't do that in Ansible. I would do that in Python. That would be a much better way to do it. Because Ansible is not great at logic. So I'd want to do something else. In fact, this is one of the limitations we're seeing right now. And actually, you know what? This actually might be better done as a Python script. So the stream just turned into, instead of Ansible, it's Python. Because this would be a lot easier to do in Python. Because then I could just do loops and loops, and that would be very, very easy. But let's keep going with Ansible. Maybe we can figure it out to make this work in Ansible. Yeah, actually, now I'm like convincing myself that this should be a Python script, not an Ansible script. Because, like I said, because we're not generating a config, we can add objects. And if the objects are already there, and then I remove it from this data model, it doesn't get removed from ACI unless I put in some fancy logic to do a comparison of the two, which, again, I could. But might as well just do it in Python anyway. Because what is the benefit of running Ansible over Python in this case? And I can't really think of one. That is a good question. Sometimes the tool you're using is not the right tool. And I'm kind of slouched right now. I'm going to change my camera. All right. But this would be interesting to see if I could solve this problem. Could be good to know down the road. So I'm going to go ahead and try to solve this problem, and then maybe decide later if I should just do it all in Python. All right, so the loop wants a list of dictionaries. So we'll do name, tenant 1, name, tenant 2, name, tenant 3. So it likes that. And then for the VRFs, maybe it wants, so it would be tenant.vrfs. Tenants name tenants VRFs. So oh, you know what I want because it's a list, it's just a first item in the list. Loop tenants. Looking up the loop documentation. Oh, you know what I could do? I could do the chat GPT. This is one of those things you can that AI is sometimes good at. See if that approach works. Create a playbook. Ansible does loops through a list of dictionaries and loops through a nested list of dictionaries. See what ChatGPT comes up with. Well, formatting is way weird. So it looks like they've got kind of the same thing. Yeah, it looks like it's doing something similar here. Yeah, it's got a nested list here, so this is a good start. So this is the key, and these are a list of dictionaries and a sub list of dictionaries. So this is looking good, because this is the problem that I'm facing. So one of the nice things about ChatGPT, I think, is just that it can create some good examples for you. The cut and paste is although it's not using it's not using fully qualified names. So ChatGPT and other large language models, you have to be careful with them, because it doesn't obviate your need to understand how things work, but they can control. formatting on this was like particularly weird. Oh, I think this might be the key here. So that's kind of cool that it came up with that. Except this might be a formatting issue. Mapping values are not. Line 2, column 8. Oh, yeah. That's a formatting issue. Of course, all right, let's try that. So now I'm just trying to isolate because it looks okay to me. Let's see what the problem is. Line 2, column 8, but maybe it's mapping values are not allowed in here. The vars. Nope. Oh, it was off. I had a space in front of the 2 dashes. And Ansible doesn't like that, or YAML doesn't like that. That's one of the nice things about using something like, okay, vars fitting line to be vars. It's off. So it's a nice thing about working with these editors, these IDEs, because they have built-in linters. That would have let me know that I had those mistakes. Instead, I wasn't paying attention because they're easy to miss. So it's all just been formatting. Jeez. Tasks. Okay. Task include an object with an undefined variable. So that might be a bust. Another reason why I missed the IDEs. I could have done that a lot easier. Let's see if that'll work. Okay, so that worked. Loop 3 users, item name. So that's pretty normal. That's what we've been doing. That I don't have a problem doing. So user is, we're looping through users, sub-elements, sub-elements, maybe that's what I need. Sub-elements, SSH keys. So let's try that real quick. Key should point to a list. So let's make that a list again. This is good because this is how I wanted to do it in the first place. No, look, whoa, actually that worked out better than I thought it would. That actually solved my problem without even knowing it. This might have been a much easier solution than I thought it was going to be. No, it did not create the VRFs for tenant 2. Why did it look like it did? It has the information to do it, which is exciting. Oh, because I did tenant 1. Duh. Tenant item.name. Maybe. Let's try it. Did it create a bunch of tenants in tenant 1? Did it create them all? VRFs. No, it only created one. It didn't create the second one. Didn't even do it right for the first one. Oh, that's because I did this. I'm going to delete this tenant just so I know that it was, there we go. Let's see if it'll do that. All right, I'm also going, I'm going to comment this out and just use And this is going to be a debug. So we use Ansible built-in .debug. And the message will be item. And the loop will be the same thing. Because it looked like it was giving me good information. And then this debug will just print out what it thinks. And it did. So this is the solution. I just need to figure out how to get all this information into there. Roxy X, what is more practical and what would Spock do? If I can do this easily in Ansible, I'll just do it in Ansible. I think people have. I think there were some people watching. I think there's a third person watching. Okay, so if you're just joining us, I am goofing around with Ansible and ACI because I have not worked with ACI in a while, and most of my Ansible lately has been against single configuration devices, and ACI is not a single configuration device. ACI is controller based. Controller based means that the configuration state for every device is stored in one place on an APIC cluster, and it pushes the configs to the devices. We have no ability to directly influence the configuration on leaf 1, spine 1, leaf 2, etc. Instead, we can only configure the APIC. So I'm using Ansible to configure the APIC using various Ansible modules for ACI. And now my goal is to make a single playbook that will take information from a simple data model and then configure tenants, VRFs, bridge domains, subnets, and EBGs. And so the simple data model looks like this. And I need to take this information and put it into Ansible through loops. But the problem is each of the modules will configure a different part. So I need to loop through all of this, and I need access to other parts of the setup. So I need to be able to plug the variables into the right places, and I've been having trouble doing that because I want to be able to loop through it. And doing any kind of network automation is basically a practice in looping. Automation is 50% loops. How am I going on time? I got another hour on the setup. All right. ChatGPT did point me in an interesting direction that I hadn't considered. So message item, we've been looping through tenants and sub-elements. The sub-elements of VRFs. And that's good. So it gave us a bunch of... So item looks like this. Tenant 3. Index is 0. So it gave me just tenant 3. That's interesting. Is it reversed? Tenant and tenant. No. Is there node 2? Counts each item in the list gets an index number. I need to figure out how to do item tenants. What is one of them? T2 VRF1. Trying to model the data that I got. All right, that worked. So item is a list. Yeah, I didn't really. So names, VRFs. It's looping. I just need to grab the right values. The tenants. What? Item is 0. Index. That was what it was doing. Man, this is a tough one. Nested loops, Ansible. It says, to this day, I keep returning to your comment and just behold its beauty for the moment. So it looks like someone figured it out. Someone said 100 or something for Ansible is not that good at. Yeah, kind of seems like it. Oh, this is Jinja. They're using Jinja. Weird. Double loop Ansible. Let's see if that'll... All right, I'm going to do a bit of housekeeping just to give my brain a break here. So this is what network automation is like. There's something you want to do and you don't know how to do it. And then sometimes the answer comes really quick. And then sometimes you're just sitting there going, how the frick do I do this? So I will create a... so one thing I don't like about this is, can I even do a git push from here? I don't think I can. Yeah, okay, I can. Do I want to though? All right, I'm going to create a GitHub repo that's going to have this stuff on it, because I think I'm going to have to come back to this at a later date. Maybe while listening to some 90s hip hop. So I'm going to make a new repo, and it's going to be... Ansible ACI Playground. Now, do I want to actually clone this, or just, I've just got a couple of files I can just, so do I want to actually, like, I just created on another screen here, I've just created a GitHub repo. Do I want to clone all this stuff, or just copy a couple of files, because it's just a couple of files? I think I'll just copy a couple of files. So cat Ansible config. Let's copy that. Cat inventory.yaml. So once I can create a new environment. I'll probably create one a little bit later today or tomorrow, and then that way I'll rename it to ACI Playground and have an Ansible and a Python part. I think I'll do that. Create a new file. Inventory.yaml. I like to create playground repos because that lets me just kind of play around and keep track of some of the stuff I've done. And sometimes I'll play with something and I will put it aside for a few months and come back and forget all the stuff that I did, like config files and preferences and playbooks and stuff. And so it helps me to have a place that I call them playgrounds. So I gave it a name and I'm going to rename it right now. I'll post it into the chat in just a second here. I'll put it into the notes section of this video. What am I going to do? I want to rename a repo. Forget how to do that. Oh, there it is. Rename. Call it ACI Automation Playground. There we go. There it is. Then I'll create a directory. How do you create a directory? How do you create a directory on the GUI? So yeah, I'm trying to create a directory here. There's add file. Sometimes figuring out how to do the simplest stuff can be like really annoying. Projects, wiki, security, insights, actions. Because I want to move these files into a directory. I could clone it. Oh, gotta clone it. Okay. Do it the hard way. I'll just do it in my Jeez. Did I already have some stuff on here? Did any of this work? Yeah, maybe. Git clone. Fun fact: when you, at least as far as I've noticed, when you create a directory that's empty and then you sync the repo, it won't include the directory if it's empty. So I'm going to do git commit or git add, git commit, rearrange, or git add, git commit, rearrange, push origin main. Okay, should push in a second. There we go. Yeah, it's there's a Linux box that you can get to via in the DevNet or in the what's it, DevNet sandbox, whatever, for Cisco. It's just a Linux box. There's a desktop on there and it's running X11. I just don't know how to get access to the graphical part, and I don't think they have VS Code on there. Do they like VS Code? No. So it's all text here. It's kind of like old school. It's like automation in 2012 or 2013. And I'll do cat create tenant. Where is this? Oh, I put it in ACI. Shoot. Automation Playground. All right, put it in here, playbooks. Just real simple stuff there. And then there's my data model. Maybe we'll come and hit this up with some Python later. I'll do another Python. Do this in Python. Where's group vars? Oh, there it is. And create a new file called apic cluster.yaml. Maybe I should have synced it up. This is kind of the obnoxious way to do it. But there's so much other stuff in here, I don't really want to keep it. Cat requirements. Oh, that is an old version of Ansible. What are we running here? 2.9, that's not that bad, but geez, what am I running? 218. They're on 2.9. Yeah, they're running an old version of Ansible. I think that's it. I think we'll call it a stream here. Got a problem statement. Problem is no problem statement. How do I recursively loop through nested lists of dictionaries for multiple disparate modules, tasks in Ansible? I think there's a solution. I just can't figure it out, and I've spent enough time on it. I think my brain needs a break, so I'm going to go for a walk. And I'm going to stop this here. So I got some progress done. I got some stick time with Ansible and ACI. I haven't touched ACI in a long time, so this is kind of exciting. Well, maybe not the kind of exciting that's worth being excited about. So push that. What does my repo look like now? ACI Automation Playground. I've got Ansible. I've got my inventory file. I've got some playbooks. Create tenant. Oh yeah, I want the one that I've been working on. Glad I checked. Loop ACI. Push that, so now it's all. Yeah, I've been doing a lot of Arista stuff because I've been teaching a lot of Arista stuff, but now got some time. I'll play around more with ACI. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the stream now. I'm going to go for a walk and then come back to this at a different time. Thank you for watching.